And once again, welcome everybody to this afternoon session in which we will be chatting about assignment 2 and the feedback on assignment 2. Now, generally, I do not discuss feedback of assignments to this extent, but I have noticed during the semester that there was some anomalies going on and odd things going on, which has potential repercussions. So I decided to make an exception, and you would have noted that I gave feedback on assignment 1 and now giving feedback on assignment 2. So the layout of our class this afternoon is not going to be a very long class. We're just going to look at assessment 2. We're going to chat a little bit about referencing and copying and the importance of a reference list. Now, those of you who joined the session in which we discussed the case studies will remember that I spoke a little bit about the framework for assessment at UNISA, and that all UNISA assessment has to be aligned with our assessment policies, and as well as other guidelines issued by the Department of Higher Education and Training, to ensure that our assessment is always fair and transparent and open, and is actually assessing what must be assessed in terms of the discipline in which we are working. I noticed at the bottom of my slide, I did not fix the footer, so my apologies for that little gremlin that came in there. The footer should be reading assignment 2 feedback. Okay, so pass rates. The pass rates for this past assignment 2 does not look very good. In actual fact, there were a great number of failures. Some of the failures are largely due to, some of the failures are due to students submitting wrong documents or one-page documents or submitting the question paper. And at this stage of the semester and at this stage of your academic career, you should be double checking things like that. And it should not be left up to your lecturer to double check. And other things that contributed to the not so hot pass rate was students simply still not understanding what it is that the questions are asking of them. So hopefully today's session, we will be able to demystify some of these issues. I know I dealt with this in our class on case studies, but I want us to all remember again the different levels of assessment. In our space, we use what is called Bloom's taxonomy, and I've given you there Bloom's revised taxonomy because Bloom's has been adapted a little bit. And it goes according to level. So basically the levels of assessment range from the most basic, in which we ask you to recall information, to list information, to name and to find. And then we ask you at the second level to explain things, to explain a concept, to interpret something or paraphrase. And you would have noticed that paraphrasing is a very large part of what you should be doing in an academic space. Then application, using information in a familiar situation, you must apply certain principles or certain theories. And then we get to higher order thinking, which is analysis, evaluation, and creation. And at this stage of your studies, we are working primarily in the steps of analysis and evaluation, especially where it comes to case studies and the use of case studies. So let's get to case studies, what they are and why they are important. Let's pause a moment and ask ourselves about the use of case studies in assessment practices. Remember that you are working in an adult context. where you are the driver of your own learning. And as such, I need to design an assessment that will be useful to help me assess whether or not, and to what extent, you are understanding the work, the theories, and the principles of the module I teach, and how these relate to or are applicable in or are applicable to real life situations. So at this stage of your academic journey, I should not be asking MCQ questions or simple true and false questions unless I base them on a case study. So what we have tried to do in our context is to design case studies that are context specific. Case studies are designed to measure your understanding. So in other words, do you understand, do you comprehend what a principle is? And as a result of your understanding, are you able to apply these principles or theories in an unfamiliar context? In other words, in a case study that I give you. So you will be asked questions about principles and theories using the case study, and using the case study as foundation. That is how you had to answer the questions. Now, what I do and what all the lecturers do when we design our assessments, we do not always assess on our own. So we have external markers who are in industry. When I talk about industry, I refer to not just the South African Police Service, but I refer to like the insurance industry. I refer to semi-state institutions like ESCOM, where they are investigators or risk managers. There are also assessors with us who are in private context or in corporate environments, and who do investigations in that space. But for the most part, 99% of our assessors have practical investigative experience of many years, some of them 3-4 decades of experience. So we make the practice of engaging our external markers when we set up the assignment and when we design the memorandum or the recommended answers, for the simple reason that in a multitude of counselors there's wisdom. So it's always better to have more eyes on something and more views or opinions, because then you will not necessarily get caught off guard, or there will be a greater probability of a well formulated, well crafted, and practical assignment being designed. So some of the challenges we picked up in this past round of assessment is that there is still confusion between the Locard and the Lochner principles. Some students found another definition of the Lochner principle in terms of evidence collection and the chain of custody. So I'm not sure where they found that. Then there was confusion about the evidence gathering, and we're going to touch a little bit about evidence gathering, why we do what we do, because at the end of the day, we are led by the premise that he who alleges must prove. There is still confusion about surveillance. There was a question on surveillance, and some of you again just spoke about the CCTV cameras and the surveillance cameras in the operational control room. There were again many examples where students simply copy and pasted out of the study guide or another source. The use of AI, artificial intelligence, to complete some of the assignments was also, to our horror, something that we are picking up more and more. And then another factor was either incomplete or no in-text references. That's where you include a reference in your answer. And then also incomplete or no reference list. So we will chat a little bit about that as we carry on. So let us view tutorial letter 202 quickly for some clarity on assignment 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up the feedback tutorial letter so that we can start looking at what it is you were supposed to do, what was expected of you. All right, so everybody should by now have access to this tutorial letter. It was posted on your module site, and I have also sent it onto the Telegram group for this module. So I want to highlight a couple of things in the feedback tutorial letter. So the first thing I tell you is that the primary objective of the assignment was to familiarize you with the use and application of case study type assessment. Please note, we will be using the same case study, the exact same case study for the upcoming exam. Make a mental note of that so that you are prepared. Unfortunately, some students did again opt to cheat in assignment 1 as well as assignment 2. Those students have been issued with warning letters. And I have to, at this stage, remind you of the following exam rules. Please make sure that you read these rules. These rules will also be shared with you during the exam when you write the your various examinations. So copying directly from the study guide or other sources will result in penalties. So if you copy directly and let's say a question was out of hypothetically 5 marks and you copy directly and there is no reference, then you will get 1, maybe 2 marks. So you will not pass if you simply just copy out of the study guide. By paraphrasing the work, in other words, by presenting the work in terminology or in a sentence that is your own construction. Somebody's mic is unmuted. Can I just ask you to make sure that your mics are muted? Thank you very much. So you have to make sure that I can see from what you have written there that it's number 1 in your own words and that you are explaining it in the way you understand it. This helps me to understand, do you understand what it is that you are saying? And when you copy and paste or you use AI to generate your own answer, then it's not your own answer because it's not your own words. And these answers stand out like a red flag. So you will be penalized when you do that. Now, in this assignment, it was required of you to reference your answers, but not all of them. You will also be expected to reference your answers in the summative exam, in the upcoming exam. So let me just quickly say something about the referencing. So what you are seeing here, for example, when I insert this link takes you to tutorial letter 101. This link takes you to examples of in-text referencing, and this takes you to the reference guide. Please make sure you use only this reference guide. When I talk about an in-text reference, I talk about a reference that is in the text. When I talk about a reference list, I talk about a reference list at the end of the text. Okay, so feedback on assignment 2. The majority of you had the cover page, the table of content, answers with references, and a reference list. And this is your case study. We will be using this exact same case study during the exam. Okay, please just make a mental note of that. Okay, so now answers as aligned with each question. So the first question was simply that you had to explain the difference between the Locard and the Lochner principles, obviously in your own words, and this explanation had to have a reference because you read it somewhere. There is no such thing as general knowledge in the academic space because you were not born with general knowledge. Through your socialization, through reading, through looking at TV, through school, you were taught things, and that is how you gain insight and wisdom and knowledge. So it's not your general knowledge, it comes from somewhere. So for the most part, there wasn't a major challenge except for this one, the Lochner principle. The majority of the challenges that we found there was where students simply went, I don't know, elsewhere, and they found that there is somewhere in America a Lochner principle about evidence and the chain of custody, and that they gave as the Lochner principle. It is incorrect because the Locard principle in our South African context is every touch leaves a trace. So in the physical, when two objects come into contact with each other, they leave trace evidence of each other on each other. The Lochner principle is simply the application of this theory in cyberspace where there is no physical touch, but electronic touch, where a cell phone signal is touching a cell phone tower, and where a person's movements can actually be traced through these signals on the different towers, and that is the Lochner principle. Now you were asked, where in the case study can you apply the Locard principle? So this question has two parts, where and what. And some of you would just say where, but you would not say what. Remember, as an investigator, you get given an assignment, you get given a crime to investigate. And although this is not a legal module, you are functioning in a legal context where crimes are classified according to either common law or statutory law in general now. And then you need to use the formalized crime definition to prove the allegation against a person. So if I want to prove that, let's say, Koketsu needs to prove that I was not at work on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Then there is an allegation of absenteeism. So in other words, I was not at work. So she has to prove and get evidence that either my card swipe or my biometrics, like my fingerprint, was not swiped on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So he who alleges must prove. And that is how we focus on the where and the what in terms of evidence collection. So you had to identify any relevant place in the case study where the physical exchange of evidence may take place and to explain what evidence this may be produced. So this one does not require a reference. Now, many of you went to the case study and you explained to me that Nomsa Sitole was in the control room and she was using the computer, she was using her cell phone, and you were telling me that every touch leaves a trace. Remember, her use of the computer is not in dispute. What is in dispute, or what do we need to prove? We need to prove at this stage the 5 CIT heists. We need to be able to link or prove a link between them. That is what we are investigating. So if we go back to the answer, we need to look for the place where physical exchange of evidence may take place. So let's go take a look at that. So where are we now? We are here by the group of 20 robbers ram into a CIT vehicle. So where there's a ramming, there is contact. So there will definitely be trace evidence where the Fortuner disables the CIT vehicle. So that is one place. What will it produce? It will leave trace evidence of the paint of the CIT vehicle on the Fortuner and vice versa. When that happens on the tar, where the tires skid, there will be trace evidence of the tires. There will be glass shards. All of that is where contact takes place, and it will be able to link the specific Toyota Fortuners with each scene. Where also automatic, the firearms that they used, the cartridges, the bullets that will be found at the scene, because some of them discharged their firearms at the scenes. You will be able to then link the different scenes to each other. You may even be able to link the different expended cartridges to certain batches, and be able to link that to certain buyers, because remember, you cannot purchase ammunition without a license, a valid license. And you will be amazed how many of the CIT robbers actually are legal gun owners or own guns legally. And then let's take a look at the cigarette butts was the other point. Some of them smoked to the scenes they are smoking, and you can link the DNA possibly found on the cigarette butts. So this is just, in short, what we were looking for in terms of 1.2. And then obviously just the where, and you had to identify the relevant place where the physical exchange, and explain what evidence this may be produced. So please make sure when you read the question, you read the entire question, and you can actually just highlight for yourself where in the case study. Okay, so here is let's say here is an action word, and what. So I have to answer a where and a what question, and make sure that you address those. Where in the case study can you apply the Lochner principle, and what evidence may be produced? Now, the where is only in terms of the cell phone, because the Lochner principle is about cyberspace. It's got nothing to do with her computer logins. It's got nothing to do with her Twitter account. It's only got to do with Nomsa Sitoli's use of her cell phone. So, and there we have it, just the cell phone, because from the cell phone, you will be able to link going back, who she's been talking to, who she's been sending messages to, telephone numbers. There might be other SIM cards. You will get geographic locations. You will be able to get approximate speed and directionality of her, and then those people that you are linking. You will be able to identify possible places where there may be physical evidence or suspects, communication between individuals, calls. You will be able to identify any modus operandi in terms of that. And so the list goes on. But this, you had to link to the case study. got nothing to do with the computer logs. This has to do with the case study and the type of evidence that it will produce. Again, this answer does not require a reference. Now, from this, I was hoping that when you see this, narrow down the geographic area, indicate places where possible evidence may be found, that when I ask the next question on surveillance, that you would put the 2 and 2 together. So let's go look at the next question. Surveillance is a good method to gather evidence against the suspect. Do you think using surveillance to gather evidence against the primary suspect, Ms. Nomsa Sitoli, is a valuable investigative strategy? And motivate your answer. There is only one answer, and it is yes. Then you explain what surveillance is, the different types of surveillance that can be used, and the answer obviously needs a reference. Now, based on your answer for question 2.2, what evidence could be gathered by conducting surveillance on Nomsa Sitoli? Motivate your answer. So obviously the answer was yes. So you will do covert surveillance, you will gather intelligence and evidence of people she meets, you will take photos where they move around, possibly vehicles and addresses that are identified. You could also identify addresses where some of the money could be hidden, where firearms and other evidence may be found, where they might be sourcing some of their ammunition, their vehicles. And obviously this answer needs a reference because you are talking about specific methods of surveillance. So unfortunately, some of you here told me about the surveillance in the control room and using that. That is not in dispute. Remember, we are trying to follow her movements. We are looking at her cell phone evidence. And then if we can couple that with covert surveillance, where we do mobile as well as static surveillance, then we can follow and see who she's meeting, where she's going, photographs of the people, the places, the vehicles. You might even be able to see forthcoming potential hijack victims where they are looking for specific vehicle types, which has to happen before the crime is committed. So I'm sure you understand there what it is that you had to do. Okay, our first question. When an investigator needs to investigate a series of apparently linked crimes, modus operandi is a valuable tool. So I make this statement. Explain in your own words what modus operandi means. In your own words, not in ChatGPT's words, not in any other AI words, your own words, and discuss how it can help an investigator to connect different crime scenes to a particular criminal or criminal group. And that, guys, you were expected to explain in your own words, MO. Then you had to tell me how can you use MO, the specific mode of operation, their practices, their techniques, their tools of trade, to link different criminal groups to different scenes, or the same criminal to different scenes. So that is actually very self-explanatory, and it needs a reference, obviously. Now, the next one caused all sorts of confusion. So use the case study to identify the trademarks of the criminals involved in the cash and transit attacks and motivate your answer. Now, you had to identify the trademarks of the criminals involved in the cash and transit attack. So the guys physically at the scene, the guys attacking the CIT vehicles. Some of you did beautifully, yeah? And others talked about Nomsa and her cell phone and her computer and the restaurants and the Twitter account. That is not the specific attack that we were looking at. That is outside that scope. Yes, it's part of the MO, and it's definitely maybe considered as trademarks before and sometimes after, But in terms of the question, the CIT attacks, that is where I wanted you to focus at the scene. So let's take a look. There were 20 robbers, and they rammed the CIT vehicle with a Toyota Fortuner to disable it. They threatened to burn the vehicle to force the driver and crew out. They had automatic and semi and small caliber firearms. They usually have this type of firearm, so that's not really an anomaly. But what is the flamethrower. The suspected gang leader always wears a red Mickey Mouse mask. A grey knitted hoodie covers his head. He is the first to approach the scene, always the last to leave. Then, before he leaves the scene, he raises his weapon and fires a short burst of rounds in the air. So, absolutely a trademark. He is left-handed, a trademark. He does not drive, a trademark. And he's always a passenger in a black Mercedes-Benz SUV. Those are all trademarks, but some of them may also be part of MO, modus operandi. So the easiest way to differentiate between something that is modus operandi and something that's trademark, modus operandi is actions or activities that are necessary to complete, to make the crime happen, for the crime to be committed. For example, the ramming of the CIT vehicle with a Toyota Fortuner. That is part of the MO. But the use of a Toyota Fortuner in itself is not just part of the MO, but it's also part of the signature. They could have used any other car. The use of the car in itself is not a crime unless it's a hijacked Toyota Fortuner of a specific year model. And that is how you would differentiate between those two. So that is what we were looking for in that question, in that answer, and no reference is needed. Question 4.1, also another question that caused all sorts of strange answers. So a polygraph is a lie detector. Do you agree or disagree with the statement? Explain your viewpoint. Now, there is only one answer, and that is disagreement. A polygraph is not a lie detector. It's inaccurately referred to as a lie detector, and when people use a term long enough, it becomes common speak, and then a perception is created of what this thing can do. It's not a lie detector. Then you had to say what it does. It records reactions. It's a tool to assist in the investigation. It requires extensive skill, and it should be able to accurately interpret the information by the one that's doing it, and obviously it needs a reference. 4.2, discuss whether or not the use of a polygraph would be a viable option in your investigation of Ms. Nomsa Sitole's alleged crime involvement, and motivate your answer. Again, one answer only, and the answer can only be no, for the simple reason that Nomsa Sitole is an asthmatic, and therefore immediately it disqualifies her from being a candidate for a polygraph examination. And then you must have a reference for this answer, and that is your assignment. So you would have had to have a reference list at the end. Now, you were awarded marks based on this rubric. There where there's no reference list and there are no credible sources, you get a 0. There where there are limited relevant references, and the reference list is there to a certain degree, between 1 and 2, and so the marks go up. I don't think there's anybody that got 5 out of 5 for that. Now, please take note, we will be using the same rubric in the exam. We will look at the accuracy of your referencing in the text and your reference list at the end of the assignment. Okay, and therein ends the feedback tutorial. I remind you again of the live classes. Please make an effort to attend those classes. If you are unable to attend the class, it's not a train smash. You can always just view the recording afterwards, and then you can benefit from the recording. And I think we have reached the end of where I'm talking. And now I want to ask you if there are questions. I just want to double check quickly in the chat. There are no questions in the chat yet. So if there are questions from the floor, I'm going to ask you to raise your hand, and then I will call on you. I will acknowledge you, and then you can pose your question. Ah, Winnie. Awesome. Winnie, you may unmute yourself and ask.
Good afternoon, Prof, and thank you so much for the class. I would like to ask if this exam is the open book or not. Thank you.
Winnie, very important question, and my apologies for not clarifying that. Yes, for FOR3701, it is an open book. But now I want you to remember, because something is an open book doesn't mean it's easy. I've had, in my final year of my master's, one of my modules was project management, and we wrote an open book exam of 4 hours, and I was not able to finish. I simply did not finish because open book assessments are so much more difficult. So you will have to go and prepare yourself in terms of your study guide, where what is. And I want to encourage you, and I think this is where one of the problems came in with the polygraph. There is a sentence that says a polygraph is a lie detector, and that's what students read that, and then they read no further. You have to read the entire chapter to get to the overall understanding of what the author is saying. It's a principle you apply in crime investigation. You speak to as many people as possible, and you talk to them once, maybe twice, sometimes 3 times about their recollection of the event under investigation. You don't ask them one question and then thank you, turn around and walk away. It's got no context. So when he thank you, yes, definitely open book exam for my module. Winnie, do you have another question? Because I see your hand is still raised.
Are we allowed to use other sources, or we just use the study guide?
No, please use other sources. Use other sources, please, but make sure you reference them for obvious reasons. But please look at the exam rules. ChatGPT is not a reliable and valid source. That is akin to cheating. So please make sure that whatever sources you use are valid, reliable academic sources. Okay, I have a question in the chat box. Are peculiar habits part of trademarks? As the cigarette butts were found at the scene, it was not mentioned in Tatua 1, and they fall under peculiar habits of the perpetrators. Not really, because it's considered relatively normal for people to smoke in a tense situation. But for example, if one of these perpetrators were to light a cigarette and extinguish it on the head of the driver, that would be a peculiar habit, because that's not necessary. It's not necessary to do that. So I would not classify cigarette butts and cigarette smoking as a habit, unless you are smoking a Cuban cigar. So don't discard it necessarily. Look at it and ask yourself what type of cigarettes have been smoked, because you may be able to link the brand to a specific DNA profile, to a specific, let's say, shop or supplier, and thereby trace your offender. But no, in this instance, I would not call it a specific habit or a trademark. Okay, the exam will be out of how many marks? The exam will be out of 80 marks. 80 marks, open book. It's going to be a 4-hour exam. You will be proctored using the Invigilator app, and you will have to reference and have a reference list. Okay, do we include a table of content in the exam? You can if you want to. I won't want a table of content. I just want your cover page. I think drafting a table of content is going to take valuable time that you need to answer the questions. So you can if you want to, but it's not necessary. My pleasure. We will be having a session probably in next week, in which we do a little bit about, talk about the exam prep and proctoring and the Invigilator app. You are all third-year students. Some of you may be supplementing this assignment or this module. So I think for the most part, the majority of you should be having experience with the Invigilator app and know how it works. I've shared the links for the sessions on training. Please do yourself a favor and go and attend the training, and do yourself a favor and go do the mock exams on the app, so that you can just familiarize yourself with the process and the procedure. And also note that there's a different exam platform to access your exams on the day. It's not via the module site. So make sure you know where to go to, please. Okay, Sindisiwe, you are saying, but what you just mentioned here about peculiar habits is not mentioned in the study guide. So this for me means that some other answers are going to be wrong because you and the guide say opposite things. Okay, so you are mentioning two things. You are first of all saying that I'm saying something that's not mentioned in the study guide. And now you are saying that some other answers are going to be wrong because what I'm saying is opposite to the study guide. Okay, so am I saying something that's opposite to what's in the study guide? Or am I saying something that is not in the study guide? Let's just start there. If you help me to clarify that, Sindisiwe, then I can answer. Or are you referring to the comment I made about the polygraph being a lie detector? Omokete, I'll be with you now. Sindisiwe, is that the example that you are referring to? You can just give me a thumbs up if I'm on the right track. Okay, I'm going to assume that is what. Okay, yes. But there is, Sindisiwe, there's no space in the study guide to go into such absolute depths. And that is why you are encouraged at a third year to do your own reading and additional research and go and read the additional things I share with you. And that is where the value of the online classes also comes in, because this is where we can delve in and unpack those things, those nuances, those in-depth things. There is simply not enough pages and time in one semester to be able to go to the depths that we could be doing, unfortunately, because of the online tuition space and because of the limited time and limited pages available. So yes, that is unfortunately the context in which we are studying in at UNISA. Okay, Mamoketi asked, so the exam will count 80% and both assignments will contribute to 20% for the final year mark. Yes, that is correct. So the better you do in the exam, the better you the better you will have in terms of your 80% towards the final mark. Okay, Prof, basically what you said is that the Lochner principle has got nothing to do with computers, but cell phones. Yes. Computers is the type of, I think you might be confusing electronic evidence and cell phone evidence. Don't confuse the two. The Lochner principle applies only to cyberspace. When you are moving around with an electronic device that sends and receives signals, it can be a cell phone, it can be a walkie-talkie. I don't know if they still use that. I don't know how many of you wear a smart watch, which links with GPS tracking. Is there something else? Sorry, Siri just heard her name. So anything that impacts on or causes a footprint, in inverted commas, in cyberspace, that is where the Lochner principle comes in. If you are doing, let's say you're doing an audit trail, then that the keystroke and the bouncing of the let's say I'm searching this site and that site and that site, that's not the Lochner principle. That is simply electronic evidence which leaves an audit trail. Other than that, I don't know how to explain it, but yes, so Lochner, cell phones, cyberspace, please. Awesome. Okay, so Gurley, I will, once we are done with the class, I will post the link to the recording on the module site. And then I'm going to also post the link to the recording, because I put everything on my YouTube channel, because some students have data problems and then they have like data for YouTube and then they can use it for their classes. So that is where I will be posting the class recording. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions. Are there any other hands? Any other pressing? Okay, if I say no, a polygraph is not a lie detector machine, and you explain what a polygraph is and then what a lie detector is, will I get marks? You should get marks, number one, for saying no, a polygraph is not a lie detector, and then for explaining what a polygraph is. So you should have gotten marks for that, but using the term lie detector and polygraph in one sentence for is problematic, because it creates the misconception. Will the exam questions be taken from the entire study guide? Yes, the exam questions will come from the entire study guide. Nkupani, I see your hand. You've dropped it again. So the themes that are covered in the study guide and the themes that are covered in the assessments, assessment 1, assessment 2, that is where I'm going to be focusing using the case study of assignment 2. Okay, I see a hand. Nkubani, yes, you may unmute yourself. Okay. I see somebody has, your hand is dropped. Okay, I see we have a question. We won't lose marks if we use only the study guide to answer the examination. No, you won't lose marks, but remember the exam is going to be based on a case study. So there will be questions that cover the principle or the theory or the literature. But there will be questions that you have to do application, where you have to use the case study and put the theory against the case study and answer based on the case study. Is intact references the one we use in the paragraph of the study guide? Yes. But make sure that you reference the study guide correctly. There have been numerous discussions about how to reference the study guide. I think we've had the chats on the Telegram group and on the class that I gave specifically on references. So please take a look at that and make sure that you reference the study guide correctly and accurately. Any other questions? Well, Moketi, so it's not a must for you to consult other sources if you don't want to. No, obviously, it's not a must for you to consult other sources, but your study guide says the thing in specific ways, and there are only so many ways for you to interpret that. So, yes, use your study guide. You will not be penalized, but make sure that you do not copy out of the study guide, and there where it's application, that you are applying the principles against the case study. Any other questions? I see no other hands. I'm going to count down 3, 2, 1, and I think we've covered all the questions in the chat box. So I'm going to call an end to the session. Thank you very, very, very much for joining. It was wonderful to have so many of you on the platform, and I hope that you found value in the session. And you are more than welcome to go and review the session after the class as many times as you need to refresh yourself. Have a wonderful afternoon further and all the best for the week. We will chat soon when we talk about exam prep next week. Thank you, everybody, and goodbye.